What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing a pretty different type of thing. We're going to do another interview, but this time it's coming from the completely opposite end of production. So before we talked with Alan Maxon, we've talked with Jason Lyles. This time we're going from production to post-production. We're going to be talking with Spencer Cook, who was an animation supervisor on Godzilla King of the Monsters, and we're going to go in depth with the animation process for the film, how they did the special effects, everything like that. It'll be a lot of fun. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Hey, this is Spencer.
Hi, this is Derek.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm a big fan of your channel, so it's exciting to be able to talk to you, and it's really super exciting to be able to talk about Godzilla, because we were working on this movie for a while and we couldn't say a word about it, so this is really fun to do.
All right, sweet. I guess we should start out with your history with visual effects and effects in film.
Yeah, so I started at a very young age. I think I was around 8 years old or so. I don't really remember exactly because I was really young, but I saw the original King Kong and I saw Ray Harryhausen's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad around that age, around 8 or so, and it just cut some grooves into my brain that just resonated with me, and I was fascinated by what I was seeing. So I was a massive stop motion fan, monster fan, Godzilla fan from a very early age. And when I was old enough to kind of start to have an understanding that there were people behind the scenes that were creating these creatures and creating these effects, and this was an actual job that people do, then I decided that's what I'm going to do. So my initial entry into the industry was stop motion animation. So around the age of 11 or so, I started making little stop motion shorts, sculpting clay figures, and experimenting with all kinds of stuff, movie making wise, trying to figure out like how these things were done. And then just kind of continued doing that into my college years. And I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York and studied film and video and fine arts there with the intention of going into the film industry. Made a student film there, a stop motion film, and started working in commercials. This was in the 80s, and did a ton of TV shows and commercials in stop motion. So early Pillsbury Doughboy stuff, the first season of Pee-wee's Playhouse. I did a lot of the stop motion on that, and would have been perfectly happy to continue my career as a stop motion animator. And I wanted to eventually go into, like, move to Hollywood and work on dinosaur movies and monster movies and basically be Ray Harryhausen. And by the mid 90s, that all started changing, and Jurassic Park, all of that sort of made this major shift in the industry. So stop motion was still being done and still is today, and a lot of great stuff, but it's not so much like creature stuff like what I'm interested in. So I reluctantly transitioned into digital work and moved out to LA and haven't looked back since, and started working on big Hollywood movies.
Do you think there's still room for old school stop motion styled creature films to come out nowadays?
Yes, but probably as a specialty thing. I don't think that any studio would take a risk, a chance on a big budget blockbuster, like summer blockbuster. Like nobody would want to do Jurassic World, or no audience, I think, would be interested in seeing Jurassic World 3, with stop motion dinosaurs.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think audiences now are, in my opinion, like too aware of technique and too aware of behind the scenes stuff. My hope is that people would enjoy the movie regardless of, whether it's digital or animatronics or stop motion or cartoons, or whatever. But every article and review of movies talks a lot about what techniques the visual effects are using, and a lot of buzzwords: mocap, performance capture, keyframe, CGI, all this stuff. I think audiences should just enjoy the movie and not really worry too much about technique. But having said that, audiences in general are very aware of technique, and there are definitely certain preferences. Like Pixar movies and Disney's digital movies, their digital cartoons are massively successful, but whenever they do a traditional hand-drawn movie, which they don't do anymore because nobody went to see them, and I think The Princess and the Frog was like one of the last ones Disney did, and nobody went to see that, and it was because everybody wanted to take their kids and to see the new Pixar movie, which just has a different look to it, and I think there's a preference in audiences for that kind of stuff. So there's definitely an audience for stop motion, and especially stop motion creatures. There's a lot of people like us that would love to see that, but it would be a low budget kind of movie.
Well, that's kind of like the awareness that people have now is kind of the reason why I'd be interested to see if someone were to ever attempt it. Be, you know, clearly it'd have to be a very stylized kind of movie, kind of a throwback, but I'd be very curious to see how people would respond to that in the modern day.
Yeah, I would love to see that, you know, and I would love to work on a movie like that. You know, animating a stop motion dinosaur would be amazing, you know, in front of a rear projection on a tabletop, you know, with a camera looking at it, you know. I mean, that would be cool to do. And I do miss the stop motion days. You know, I really like that environment. I like that technique. I like the model making involved with that. I like manipulating a puppet, posing a puppet like that. Yeah, I don't know, maybe Netflix or, you know, a streaming service that just has boatloads of money and can do more specialty things, you know, would try something like that. But it certainly wouldn't be one of the big studios to do it like a big summer release.
Yeah, I was reading over that interview that you had sent me, that article that you had done, and I was pretty happily surprised by your top 3 effects films, which are very, very similar to my top 3. So you had...
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. You got good taste.
Yeah, you had King Kong 33, which I stand by saying that that is the most impressive film ever made. It's incredible what they were able to accomplish way back then.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the foundation that we all stand on, you know. I mean, that's really where it started. The modern movie visual effects, creature animation, really, that wasn't necessarily the first movie. The Lost World was before that, but Kong really planted that flag, and that's the foundation that we all stand on today in this industry, is King Kong.
You had Seventh Voyage as your number 2, which, another fantastic movie. It's my favorite spring movie. I love to watch that movie every spring.
Oh, do you really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's an annual thing.
It is. I love that movie.
Yeah, I couldn't watch it enough, you know. I could, and King Kong I could watch over and over again. But yeah, all of Ray Harryhausen's work, every one of his movies, I think is just a masterpiece. And I love artists who have a distinctive stamp. Like, you can watch one of those movies and just know that that's Ray's thumbprint all over that.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique situation and a unique time that he was operating in, because I don't think that can occur today in movies like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well.
That much more special.
And your number 3 I find to be very surprising, because this is a movie that no one really talks about anymore, but it is amazing. War of the Gargantuas.
Yeah.
One of Toho's best and yet most underrated films.
Yeah, I described it as one of their best non-Godzilla movies because I have a bunch of favorite Godzilla movies of mine, but War of the Gargantuas was a movie that I have a lot of nostalgia for one thing, because it played a lot on TV when I was growing up, and it usually played with Monster Zero or with Rodan or the original Godzilla. And so I saw War of the Gargantuas a lot when I was a kid, and that's a movie I think that really captures on every level that sort of lightning in a bottle thing that people in Hollywood talk about a lot, where there's, you know, the sort of sum of the parts equals something greater. And the music, the costumes, the design of the Gargantuas, the sounds that they make, and the fact that they're brothers, the story points of that are really unique in Toho movies, I think. That there's that kind of family connection with two giant monsters, and that one of them wants the other one to stop being a bad monster.
Yeah.
And it just has this kind of depth to it that it kind of picked up on as a kid, but then as I grew older and watched it as an adult, it sort of saw it on another level. And there's also something about the faces of those costumes. You can actually see the performer's eyes. And I think that really helps to make a connection with the monster. And I love all the Godzilla stuff, but you know, those big goofy eyes are not quite as readable as a real person in there. Yeah, so I love that movie, and I love that opening scene in particular when you first see the green Gargantua tipping over that boat and then chasing those sailors. That scared the hell out of me when I was a kid.
Yeah, me
too.
too.
Fantastic. It was terrifying. But it's hard to pick 3, you know, movies. There's so much stuff that inspired me to go into this kind of work. That 3 of those movies were, I mean, I could pick another top 3 that would be just as influential for me, but those three really are kind of standouts in a way.
One thing that I find interesting, because you and I were both inspired by all of the same movies, but you and I went down different routes with it, whereas I was inspired by these films and I want to go into the writing, directing side of things. What was it about these films that steered you into visual effects specifically?
I was immediately drawn to the craft of animation and stop motion animation in particular. So the sculptural aspect of it, of actually a physical puppet that you sculpt and make a mold of and put an armature in the casting. And then the craft and the artistry that goes into the performance that you're doing, because stop motion animation is kind of a slow motion performance. You get one shot at it and you're doing it from frame one till the end. And those poses that you're making throughout that are sort of incrementally changing, and you're kind of creating it as you go. And so I was immediately, at 8 years old, I didn't really know what I was seeing in these movies, but I was immediately drawn to that craft side of it.
Were you always an artistic kid?
Yes. Yeah. And my family is very artistic. My mom is an actress. My dad is an executive and an archaeologist, but he also paints and sketches and draws. And my brothers are also artistic. And we had art books around all the time, and we had music collections and paintings and stuff on the walls. So I was always around a very artistic environment thanks to my folks, and they were very encouraging of this too. So they didn't try to dissuade me in any way from this, because they saw how passionate I was about the craft side of it, and that even as a little kid I was like sculpting little things and making attempts at making sculptures that I could pose and stuff like that. So that was an extension of just growing up in an artistic environment.
That's awesome. Now, into your transition from stop motion into VFX, how was that transition?
It was pretty rocky at first. It was not something that I wanted to do. Like I said, I would have been perfectly happy to stay a stop motion animator, but I was more drawn to the creature, the photorealistic type of creature, Ray Harryhausen kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so if computers had never been invented, I think my career trajectory would have been, like, I spent a number of years in New York doing commercials, and I always saw that as a stepping stone to movies. And so my plan was to move out to LA, and I probably would have gone to a place like ILM where they were doing stop motion and go motion and some really great stuff there, and continued in the stop motion world in that way. But since all that changed, I still was more interested in working in movies. I didn't want to have a career in commercial animation, and I didn't want to have a career in cartoon features like the Henry Selick stuff, like the Nightmare Before Christmas, or what they're doing at Leica now with Paranorman and Coraline and things like that, which I love. I see all of those movies and I love all of that stuff, but that wasn't the kind of stop motion that I wanted to continue into as a career.
Right.
And so I really wanted to work on the kinds of movies that I am a fan of and that I grew up watching, which were monster movies and superhero movies and things like that. So I decided that regardless of what the tool was, I could still use my animation skills and transition into becoming a digital animator. And all of my stop motion experience came in very handy with that. So it's basically whatever technique you use or whatever tool you use, animation is animation. So the principles are the same and the basic approach is pretty much the same. So it took a little bit of time for me to get comfortable with computers, because I'm not a very computer type of person. Well, I am now, but at the time I wasn't, and I had no interest in computers per se, but I did learn how to use them to animate, and then it kind of evolved from there.
Can you talk a little bit about an overview of your work in the digital animation field?
Yeah, I guess some of the highlights would be the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I was involved as an animator and an animation supervisor on one of them, on all three of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. I was involved in Men in Black 3, the two Matrix sequels, Reloaded and Revolutions, and Alien Covenant, the remake of Beauty and the Beast, Gods of Egypt, and then Godzilla. And then a few other things in between that I don't put on my resume, like SMURFS 2. I worked on that.
Yeah, I can see why Godzilla would go above SMURFS 2.
Yeah, and, again, a fun movie. It was a great experience. It was a great team of people, but it's not my kind of movie.
Right.